Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video. Make sure you like and subscribe, or don't, I do not care. And my statistics show that only 2% of my viewers are subscribed. So subscribe, or don't, I really don't care. And by statistics, I mean analytics. And why is there a fork behind me?
Hey, don't touch my fork!
These are the strangest
That's my cousin.
things that have ever been caught on camera. This video shows what appears to be a dark humanoid-type creature crawling towards a bunch of boys playing soccer. Once the kids see it, they immediately run away in terror. Nobody knows for sure what this animal was, but many people claim that it was the South American mythical beast known as the Palmero. This next video was taken at the funeral of a 7-year-old girl. It shows one of the balloons that was next to her coffin somehow floating directly to her crying mother in the audience. Many people believe that this was the girl trying to comfort her mother from the grave.
This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, "Well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open." She's like, "I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either." Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asked her, "You ever see any ghosts walking around your attic?" Her face got completely serious, and she's like, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated, and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years.
Oh.
This is why you should always be afraid of Australia. In 2014, an 8-year-old and her family went on an extended vacation to, you guessed it, Australia. After a couple of days, she started having this horrible recurring nightmare where an alien would appear in her room and try to grab her with its tentacle. After a week of this, she is terrified to go to sleep, but her parents keep telling her that it's just her overactive imagination. One night, she swears she feels that thing grab her leg and she leaps from the bed screaming. Her family runs into the room and they see her hysterical in the corner.
That is a
and they look at
snake.
the bed and they all gasp. It wasn't an alien. It was a 7-foot-long adult carpet python that had been sneaking in through the ceiling tile and into her bed to stay warm every night.
Yikes.
Yes, the picture at the end is real. In 1876, a woman from a very
I am
prominent
never gonna
family in
go to
Paris
Australia.
goes
I've
missing.
never had plans on
After
it.
years go by and no one
Yeah.
has a clue
There's
what happened to
spiders,
this
there's
woman,
snakes.
friends and family
There's
ultimately
freaking
mourn her
kangaroos, and
death.
those things are horrifying.
25 years later,
Yeah.
and this anonymous letter shows up on the Attorney General's desk, claiming that the missing woman's family had a secret. Intrigued by the letter,
I
the
love
police
this
go to
thing
the family's
stories.
home, show it to them, and ask to search the property, to which they say, "Go for it." They search, they don't find anything, but on the way out, they notice something very peculiar. At the end of some stairs was a door that was padlocked shut. When the family refused to open it, the police break it down and make a horrifying discovery. Cowering on a rotten straw mattress in a pitch-black room was the missing woman, now 50 years old and extremely malnourished. Her mother had imprisoned her there after they had fought over her boyfriend.
How does she stop?
She had not seen sunlight or another human being in
Because she's fed.
But she hasn't seen a
Don't read the
human.
comments. It will spoil the very
Any human
satisfying
besides her
ending.
mom.
In 1999,
Or her
18-year-old
mom
kid was
slid the
obsessed
food
with a
underneath the
16-year-old
door.
Girl, but she wasn't into him. Frustrated, he breaks into her house and demands that she dates him. When she refuses, he kills her. And then he kills her 14-year-old sister too. Or so he thought. The 14-year-old survived and easily identified Paul Powell as the killer. Powell showed no remorse in court and even called the victim stupid. When he was sentenced to death, though, his attitude changed and he cried and begged for mercy. And unfortunately, mercy would come in the form of a legal loophole that switched his death sentence to a life sentence. Believing he was saved from the death penalty because of double jeopardy, he wrote this ridiculous letter to the prosecuting attorney, basically admitting to every single detail of the crime, kind of bragging about what he got away with. So the attorney just takes the letter, gives it to a judge. The judge looks at it and says, "Yep, there's new evidence here," orders a new trial, and immediately this dude is resentenced to death. And a few months later, this lowlife was executed. This is why you should always trust your gut. In the early 1970s, a college student decided to hitchhike his way home after class. A car pulls up, a man offers him a ride, and he climbs in. As soon as the car started moving, the student felt totally uneasy, like something was wrong but he couldn't quite place it. Without saying anything, he waited till the next time they slowed down and he flung the door open and ran away. 2 years later, he's flicking through TV channels when he comes across this special interview with a death row inmate. And it's just the audio recording, so he hears the interviewer ask the inmate, "Why did you remove all the door handles inside of your car?" The man just goes, "Well, the first time I tried to kill someone, I picked up a college hitchhiker who got smart at some point and jumped out of my car. So, lesson learned, remove all the door handles." When they showed his picture, the student knew immediately that he was supposed to be the first victim of John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer
Oh my
Clown,
gosh.
who had killed over 30 men and boys in his clown room and stuffed them into his basement.
And he jumped out of the moving car.
This is why you should always look under the toilet seat before you sit down. In 2003, over a 5-day period in London, 3 women showed up to hospitals with the same mysterious symptoms. They say they woke up with these horrible bite marks on the backs of their legs, and then while they're at the hospital, they become paralyzed and die. Despite their similar symptoms, the women had nothing in common except that they had recently been to the same pub. Authorities immediately shut it down and do a thorough search inside of the pub, but can't find anything deadly, until one of the detectives goes to use the pub's bathroom. As he's about to sit down, he thinks he sees something moving in the toilet, so he gives it a little kick. Hiding in the toilet was one of the world's largest and most poisonous spiders, the Brazilian wandering spider, and now they needed to catch it.
It's gonna jump over the camera.
They didn't catch it.
Oh god.
This is why you should never talk to strangers. In the early 2000s, a young girl was waiting outside her friend's house, peeling the bark off of a tree, when a strange man approaches her. As he got closer, she could see that he was grinning ear to ear.
And the guy telling the story's name is Mr. Ballin on TikTok.
Oh, yeah, he's really good.
How would you like it if I peeled your skin off?
Yeah, in case you guys want to know.
Her friend's mom yells for her to come inside, and the man walks away. It would be years before the girl's mother would finally tell her who this man really was. Her friend's mom had seen the man pinch her on the arm and had immediately called the police, who quickly rounded this guy up. Plastered all across the inside of his van were dozens of pictures of this girl. But what they found in his storage locker is straight out of a nightmare. In the locker was a chair with hand and arm restraints. Next to it was an anatomy book and hundreds of torture tools.
Oh my. That sounds horrifying.
You might not want to eat deer meat. In late 2019, a man and his grandfather were out hunting.
I've only ate deer meat once, and I really regretted it because I love deers.
Lowering its antlers and charging forward like a battering ram as if it was fighting with another animal. But when they crept closer, they could tell that the deer was all alone and something was definitely wrong with it. The deer was repeatedly ramming its head into a tree, and then finally one of its antlers breaks off and it kneels down and starts chewing on the antler.
Ew.
As they're watching in horror, the deer
That's
in a
gross.
sudden lurching
I've heard this story millions of times, but still, it's
and then
gross.
walks like a human into the nearby lake.
Oh, I forgot to do
Turns out the
something.
deer had chronic wasting disease, which is a new, highly contagious neurological
Trigger
disorder
warning
that drills holes in the
for
brain
blood
that's affected and leads to a distinct lack
and
of fear
gore.
awareness and is always fatal.
Trigger warning
And
for
now,
gore. I am
scientists
so
are
sorry for not saying that
widespread
sooner.
in 2020. This is why you should follow me on YouTube and Instagram. So apparently, TikTok might actually get banned in the US. I just thought it was a headline, but it's proving to be something far more serious, and it might actually happen. But don't worry. If you
Thank goodness it didn't happen.
Content, I'm gonna keep on.
Oh yeah, and on TikTok I have 270 something followers, right?
I've already posted like
Yeah.
30 videos. Most of it has never even
So go
been
follow me on
uploaded.
TikTok,
New
please.
stuff. And my Instagram page right here. So it's John Ballin 416. I made this before I became Mr. Ballin. And if you get me to 500k subs on YouTube, I'll open the Mr. Ballin store where you can get your flannels and backwards hats, and you can learn how to grow a crappy mustache and wear socks and Crocs and short shorts. Peak of fashion stuff, you know what I mean? So if that's interesting to you, let's go to 500k. This is why I'm proud to be an American. In 2014, a team of Navy SEALs were ambushed in broad daylight in a Bat town in Afghanistan. They managed to fight off the attack, but by the time the shooting stopped, they were low on supplies and needed to leave. As they coordinated their exit strategy, a drone overhead picked up a group of men hiding in a field near the city's exit. Fearing these might be enemy combatants preparing for another attack, a few of the SEALs stepped aside to go have a better look. As they crept down an alleyway, all hell broke loose when 2 enemy grenades came hurtling over the wall and detonated at their feet. 2 of the SEALs were immediately incapacitated, but luckily their teammates jumped into action, repeatedly exposing themselves to enemy fire in order to save their lives. Without their teammates' bravery that night, those 2 men could have died. And I know because I was one of those 2 men. So on this Memorial Day, I am forever grateful to my teammates who saved my life and to the Gold Star.
This guy was in the military?
Yeah. Have you ever looked at his profile picture?
This is what they meant.
Yeah, but I thought it was just a joke.
Strangers. In the early 1900s, a 10-year-old boy was playing in the woods when a tall man appeared and asked if he wanted to come back to his cabin for dinner. Totally caught off guard, the boy reluctantly agrees and begins walking. When they get to the cabin, the boy is relieved when he sees Paul, a family friend, sitting on the porch, so the boy happily goes inside. After they eat, the boy says thank you to the strange tall man, says bye to Paul, and then he
No,
leaves.
if he's tall, he's
He'd only
terrifying.
walked a few steps when he sees his family, along with Paul, running up the path towards him, frantically asking if he was okay. Confused, the boy says, I'm just fine, and he looks at Paul and he's like, why didn't you tell them I was with you at the cabin? And he points over his shoulder. Paul glances over the boy's shoulder and then narrows his eyes and says, you were kidnapped by a cult 3 days ago. No one's seen you. Terrified, the boy turns around to look at the cabin he just came from, and it's gone. All he sees is a dark forest that stretches for miles. This is why you should always trust your parents. In 1990, a father and his 15-year-old son worked together at a gas station in Florida. One night, the boy was sitting outside on a break when he saw a crazy-looking woman walking towards the store. They were in a high-crime area, and it was very late, so the boy turns around to look through the glass at his dad to see what he should do. His dad took one look at the woman and just shook his head, no, do not help her. The woman walks up to the boy and says, hey, my car's broken down, can you give me a ride? Before the boy can answer, his dad bursts outside and says, you need to leave here immediately. Angrily, the woman turns and leaves, cussing them both out the whole way. 1 year later, the boy's in his room at home when his dad calls from the other room and says, you've got to come in here and look at the TV. On the screen was the same woman from the gas station. Better known as Eileen Wuornos, she was a serial killer who used to pick up her male victims at gas stations in Florida. She was later put to death.
Scary
This is why
stuff.
you should never explore abandoned ships. In 2014, the U.S. Navy decided to decommission one of its oldest ships, so it brought it into port to be broken down for scrap. Before workers were allowed to actually start breaking it down, the foreman had to go on board and take pictures of every room. So late one night, the foreman spends about an hour walking through this abandoned ship with a flashlight, taking about 100 pictures. When he was done, he emailed the pictures to his boss, who quickly wrote back, who's the guy with the axe? The foreman had no idea what he was talking about, but he noticed the boss had attached one of the pictures that he had just sent him. When he opened it, he nearly fainted. There, in the bowels of the ship, poking his head
Oh
around
my.
the corner, was a faceless man wielding an axe. The foreman had spent over an hour in this hallway and never heard or saw this guy. The Navy searched the ship and never found this guy. They also reviewed security footage of the only entrance, and he never entered or left the ship.
What the heck was that?
In 2018, a group of urban explorers decided to check out this abandoned factory. As soon as they got inside, they see this warning.
Actually, though, what is that?
They go upstairs anyways, and immediately hear voices from the floor
Pause
above.
your recording.
Instead of running away like normal people, they go up to have a look on the shelf.
Stop, Leah, actually.
A few minutes
Oh,
later,
yeah, stop.
for her phone to change the song, but stopped suddenly. Reflected on her phone's screen was a person standing
Oh,
in the middle of
jeez.
the bathroom facing the shower. She somehow kept her composure, turned the water to scalding hot, and then ripped open the curtain and sprayed the intruder in the face. As they howled in pain, she ran past them to her kitchen to get her butcher's knife. In a panic, she can't find her knife, so she just runs out of the apartment and calls the police. The police go in and come out with a crazy-looking woman in handcuffs. One of the officers comes over to the girl and says, she used to live here and she had copies of your keys. Then he pauses and looks down and brings up a clear evidence bag that contained her butcher's knife, and he says, Looks like she wanted her apartment back.
Oh my, that's
Yes, this really
Something.
did happen. In 2015, a man woke up to a strange post-it note sitting on his desk. On it was a to-do list that he didn't recognize in handwriting that didn't look like his. Since he was up late the night before doing some work, he assumed he must have written out the list when he was half asleep and kind of forgot about it, so he just crumples it up and throws it away. 2 weeks later, he wakes up to dozens of these post-it notes all over his wall, and they're all blank except for one that, in the same weird handwriting, says, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you." Now feeling totally freaked out that some crazy person is crawling around his apartment at night, he starts looking for signs of a break-in, but there aren't any. Instead of calling the police, he shares his experience on Reddit asking for help, and one user's comment literally saves his life. Turns out the man was writing the notes to himself and then forgetting, because his brain was slowly dying due to a carbon monoxide leak that was only discovered because a user suggested he install a detector. This sounds totally made up until you listen to the police report. In the early 90s, a
yes.
teenage girl
Does that look
started
good,
to see
Aaliyah?
these shadowy figures that would come into a room at night and
Yes,
crawl all around
I've
her
never
room and
been
even
to
grab at her legs. At the same time,
What?
her health began
that's
to
not
rapidly
real.
deteriorate, which ultimately led to her death, which doctors never understood. A few days after her death, her sister woke up to a whistling sound and saw a creature crawling around her room with no face. The same night,
Right now I don't wanna
she was
brush.
kicked out of bed by someone. The father calls the police, who come over, they search the house, they don't find anything, it's all quiet. As they're about to leave, they hear something. Horrifying screams coming out of the bedroom. They run inside, no one's in there, but there are these huge gashes on the wall that were not there before. The police get out of there. In the police report that was filed immediately after this house call, the chief inspector and the 3 officers that were there that night swear they saw and heard the same things as the family, which means the police officially believed that the house was haunted. This is why you should never live next to crazy people. In 2015, a
Oh,
girl
well.
who was totally fed
The
up with
neighbors
her
will have
noisy
to
neighbors worked up the courage to go over there and tell them to be quiet. She knocks on the door, and out walks this insane-looking old woman who just starts hissing at her. And she doesn't stop hissing at her until the girl finally just leaves.
That's weird.
She considers calling the police, but ultimately just goes back to her room and goes to bed. But she wakes up a couple hours later when she hears that same hissing sound. Her first thought is there's no way this can be my neighbor, because she had her door locked. But then she notices there's a big lump right next to her in her bed, and she reaches over to check who it is. Her crazy neighbor leaps out of bed and runs into the closet. If you make it to
That was
the end,
obviously
I'm
fake.
sorry. In 2007, a woman was lying awake in her hotel bed when she started hearing a kid run up and down the hall laughing and making tons of noise. She considered going out and telling the kid to be quiet, but eventually just said whatever and fell asleep. The next morning, she got up and asked her teenage daughter, who was staying in the room next door, if she had heard the kid, and she said yes, it was so annoying. That night, the woman is back in bed trying to sleep when once again she hears the kid in the hall. Now feeling pretty annoyed herself, she starts walking to the front door to get a better listen when the footsteps stop right in front of her door and she hears the kid playing with the do not disturb sign. She leans into the peephole to get a better look, but the kid's gone. So she steps into the hallway and looks down the hall, and there's the kid at the far end, just standing there, perfectly still.
That was also
If you ever find
fake.
yourself in this situation, don't do what she did. In 2006, a group of cave divers decided they wanted to film a documentary in one of the most dangerous caves in the world. But only a few hours into their descent, and a freak storm erupts on land, collapsing the entrance to the cave. In
You
order
also
to
hear
avoid
those
the
footsteps
huge
downstairs?
falling rocks that were coming off the ceiling, they were forced to swim through one of the uncharted sections of the cave. After they've been diving for over an hour, they luckily come across this
Darn.
island in the middle of a tunnel, where they set up camp and wait to be rescued. After 48 hours and no sign of a rescue,
How do you spell
the cameraman
Spike?
actually starts filming in case they don't make it out of it.
Yes.
At the same time, one of their crew members does something very stupid.
I don't know.
This is why you should always
Is it
watch what you
that?
say in public. In the late 1970s, a
That's
man began
it.
breaking into homes in order to
I don't-
assault the victims inside of them. After dozens of attacks and no suspects in custody, The citizens were totally on edge, so the police decided to host this town hall meeting so they could
No, I
discuss
spelled
the
it right.
situation out in public. During the meeting, a local man stands up and says,
The CK would be
"I
Spick."
kick that guy's ass if he came anywhere near my wife." Then, in a crazy, ironic turn of events, that angry man and his wife become the next victims. Following their assault, the attacker completely changes his behavior. He goes from kind of petty home invader to full-blown serial killer, targeting only married men and their wives. When, decades later, police finally identify Joseph DeAngelo as the killer, as they're going through old photos from the case, they make a startling discovery about his motives. DeAngelo had attended that town hall meeting. Moral of the story, don't sleep on the first floor. In 2014, a young woman woke up to strange noises coming from under her bed. When she finally worked up the courage to look, there was nothing there. The next morning when she got up, there were footprints leading right up to the sliding door that went right into her room. She instantly calls her dad, who comes over and traces the footsteps back to a house of a very troubled teen who admitted to spying on her. But he swore up and down he hadn't done that in weeks. They don't believe him, and they threaten to call the police if they ever see him on the property again. That night, the girl's on her phone in bed when she starts to hear the strange sounds again.
What the heck?
Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. In 2010, a couple renting a cabin in the middle of the woods finds the guest logbook tucked underneath the bed in the bedroom. After reading through it, they decide to call the cops. The final 5 entries are all by the same man.
Be
The first
back
two
once
just
it's
talking about how great it is to be on vacation. Couple of sad
This is
Finally
my
decides he wants to
SCP
memorialize the
creature.
lion, so he sends its
It
pet
doesn't.
and
I don't really know what it is.
taxidermist.
Give it whatever SCP number you want.
I've never actually seen
It's called the Spike for short, though, and it is a spike head that will follow you around, and it depends on how much it likes you. If it likes you, it will protect you, and if it doesn't like you, it will try to harm you with spikes.
In 2005, a young woman
If you want to, I can go into more detail in another video. Just comment down below if you do want me to go into more detail or not. Well, anyways, goodbye. Thank you for watching this 2-part series on the Spike creature. Have a good night's sleep, and sorry for making these videos so long. Bye-bye.